Who is the richest Magic the Gathering character and how much money do they have? The first step in answering this question is what qualifies as wealth and how can we measure it? We are going to say that wealth is an asset you own and that could be reasonably sold regardless of quantity. Say, for example, you have 1 billion gold coins. This would qualify because you can reasonably sell a gold coin, even though the quantity of this gold makes it unreasonable. And this would count as 1 billion times the value of said gold coin. I will be using Earth prices because it's easier and because then I can compare the numbers from different planes. Urza has a lot of different resources, most of which are difficult to put a value on. For example, the Might Stone, Weak Stone, Legacy Weapon, and the 9 Titans. These are all very powerful artifacts that can do incredibly powerful things, but the worth of them is very much up to question. There really isn't much I can do to figure out the value of these items other than just make up a number. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll value the Might Stone and Weak Stone at $1 billion each, as they are one-of-a-kind, incredibly powerful artifacts. The Legacy Weapon is basically a nuke, and nuke costs vary a lot, but we're going to go with $50 million as that's pretty typical. And the 9 Titans are incredibly powerful vehicles of war, but they do require a planeswalker to operate them. We will value them at $250 million each. There are 9 of them. If we add up all these things, we have $4.3 billion of assets. But Urza also has a lot of other assets worth a lot, such as the Weatherlight. The Weatherlight is an airship that can travel through planes. As shown by this blueprint, it is 300 feet long. A similar sized cruise ship is roughly $275 million, but there are many other things contributing to its value. The Power Stone that is used to power the Weatherlight was infused with the white mana of the entire plane of Sarasram right before it collapsed. Now, this does mean that refueling the Weatherlight is incredibly difficult and impractical, but if it comes with fuel, then that adds some value. This brings up the question of what point in time we're going to use for the wealth of these characters. Now, we will be looking at the point in time that they were the richest, and for Urza, that is right before he attacked Yawgmoth, but when he was fully prepared, meaning that the Weatherlight would be full of fuel. We will say this adds $200 million of value. Also built using the seed of the oldest Magnagoth tree in Yavimaya. The value of this is also unclear as it was given a gift, but this seems to me like the value comes from the history and not the practicality or power. I would estimate it's worth about $50 million as this is an important part of Yavamayan history. With that said, an airship that can travel through planes is definitely worth a lot. And our total, if we add up the value of the parts of the Weatherlight, is $525 million. I think it's fairly to say that the ability to travel through planes adds at least $500 million, as this is one of the only ways non-planeswalkers can travel through planes. So that puts him at $5.3 billion. Urza's next asset is Teleria, which is a school of mages. Now, I initially thought of this as not too valuable, but if you think about it, this was the largest and most famous school for mages in the multiverse. That is not an easy feat. If we try and find a real-world equivalent, I think that Harvard is the best comparison. A school with an endowment of over $40 billion. Not a bad feat at all. I think that we should subtract $10 billion from that to rebuild the school since it got destroyed. This should be more than enough. Since we are choosing the point in time where they were the richest, I could have chosen before the school was destroyed. The reason I didn't do that is because Teleria wouldn't have had as much time to build up wealth. Urza also wouldn't have had the other $5 billion of assets. So if we add everything up, that gives Urza a net worth of $35.3 billion, which would put Urza at 39th on the richest people on the world list. This is the art for Dragon's Worth. It's basically just a huge pile of gold. But who does it belong to? Now, it could be any dragon on Dominaria, but my best theory is it belongs to Darigaaz. Here's why. On the art of the card Dragon Egg, we can see that it is a pile of gold in a large cave, also with weapons, so likely within the dragon's hoard. And the dragon's egg is probably Darigaaz's egg. Therefore, Darigaz owns the dragon hoard and is also storing his egg there. It's definitely a stretch, but it's the best guess I have. To compare the size of this pile in the front, we have this book. It is most likely a quarto book, which is 24 by 30 centimeters. That means that along this side, the book is 24 centimeters. So each pixel is roughly 1/5 of a centimeter. From this, we can calculate the size of this pile. Since the perspective on the other piles of gold is different, we can't really measure it with our scale. But what I can do is waste 3 days of my life trying to learn Blender just so I can make an accurate 3D model of the wealth of an imaginary character in a card game. Please subscribe. So I made this 3D model of the gold so that I can calculate the amount of gold. If we look at it from the perspective of the card, we can see just how similar it looks. If we add it all up, we have 258.1 cubic meters. Since it is gold coins, not solid gold, we have to account for packing density, which essentially means when these coins are randomly stacked, how much of that volume is air and how much is actually gold. And for coins, that is roughly 60% gold, meaning that we have 155 cubic meters of gold, which is 8 million troy pounds. Now, you may have noticed I said troy pounds instead of measuring with kilograms or avoirdupois pounds. Avoirdupois pounds? Or avoirdupois pounds.
Avoirdupois.
This is because precious metals such as gold and silver have a special method of being weighed. 1 troy pound is 373 grams or 0.8 avoirdupois pounds. Since gold is $20,400 per troy pound, that gives us $163.2 billion. But since we can't see the dragon eggs pile of gold in the main art of Dragon's Hoard, we have to account for that too. Now, according to the art direction of Dragon Egg, the egg is 8 feet long. Now, they used length to describe the egg, but I'm pretty sure they meant height. So 8 feet is 200 pixels. That means the pile below is 3 meters tall by 7 meters along the bottom. That's 90 square meters of gold, or 54 if we account for packing density. That's 2.8 million troy pounds, or a value of $56.9 billion. So if we add up the two, that gives us a total of $220.1 billion. This makes Darigaz the richest person on the planet right now. But since we are looking at the point in time in which the people were richest, we must expand the leaderboard in the same way for Earth. That means Darigaz is 13th of the richest of all time ranking. Queen Marchesa is the Queen of Poliano and controls all the government assets. While we don't know the exact size of Pollyanna, we do know that it is a highly prosperous city. So if we look at a highly prosperous city in real life, New York, we can see that it has total state assets of $380 billion. Now, whether or not this qualifies as wealth is kind of a gray area, as reasonably selling this stuff is quite difficult. We don't know how the citizens would react to a private company buying all the roads, for example. But I will count this as she's the only person in power. There isn't any structure in place stopping her from doing this. Anyways, $380 billion gets her to 7th on the richest of all time ranking for Earth. This is the art for Brass's bounty, a literal beach of gold. And if we look at the flavor text, we can see that all this gold belongs to Admiral Bracket Brass. So here's how I figured out how much gold this is. If we assume that the trees in the background are mangroves, that gives us a rough estimate that each tree is 15 meters tall, and so is this line. If we then go to a similar spot on the beach in terms of perspective and draw a line to the water and compare it to our mangrove, we can see that it is also 15 meters long. And we can tell that the gold goes out in the water because of the sandbar with gold on it. If we assume it goes 3 meters out in the water, then that gives us a width of 18 meters. I'm guessing that the depth of the gold is 10 centimeters as it covers most of the beach but some sand pokes through. If we compare this island to photos of other islands, I would guess that this island has a 5-kilometer perimeter. If we assume that half of that perimeter is beach, then that gives us 18 meters by 10 centimeters by 2.5 kilometers. That gives us 4,485 cubic meters of gold. With 60% packing density, that leaves us 2,691 cubic meters. Gold is 51,660 troy pounds per cubic meter, so it's 139 million troy pounds of gold. We are going to assume that it's 24 karat gold because it's a very deep yellow gold color, which is $20,400 per troy pound, which gives us a value of 2.8 trillion US dollars, which puts Admiral Beckett Bass in 5th place on the richest people of all time. Kenrith is the king of Eldraine and controls an entire plains. So optimally, we would look at Earth's total government assets, but the information of that is super difficult to find. So if we take the US government's $3.8 trillion in assets and multiply it by 4 because it has 1/4 of the global GDP, that gives us $15.2 trillion in assets. But it also comes with $108 trillion in debt. I won't count this against Kenrith though, as a stable economy and reasonable government spending can still be maintained even with debt. Speaking of debt, we have Kaya, who controls the Guild of Orzhov. They make their money through predatory lending practices. They will kill anyone who doesn't pay and work people as undead. They might also transfer the debt to their family. The main reason they are so rich though is compound interest and high interest rates. Say for example you owe Orzhov $10,000 and that you have a 10% yearly interest rate for 30 years without paying any of it off. At the end, you will owe them $174,494. This adds up very quickly. Combine this with the fact that Orzhov has a monopoly on Ravnica for loans, and you can tell that they are stacked. To find the actual number though, we can look at Earth's total global debt, $255 trillion. So we are going to use this figure, but that is a lot of money for Orzhov to lend out. And the reason that this is even possible without actually having $255 trillion is twofold. One, compound interest. The more that this money compounds, the faster it's going to grow, and it just adds up incredibly quickly. And two, double or triple dipping. If Orzhov can convince you to take out a loan and then put it in their bank, they can then loan that money out again. This essentially means that they can make twice the amount of money without actually having to have that money to loan out, because you are holding it in their bank. With that said, I think it's fair to say that the Orzhov Guild has $255 trillion worth of loans, as the interest rates are likely much higher than a typical loan. Remember, these are predatory loans. In the real world, there can be predatory loans which have over 100% interest, but I don't think it's this high. We really don't know the exact numbers. Another thing contributing to the growth of this wealth is that there isn't a way out of it. You can't declare bankruptcy, and if you die, they work you anyway. So the debt will always be paid off. Or the interest would grow the debt faster than you can pay it off, and they will work you for all eternity. Now, Kaya forgave a large amount of debt, mostly from people who are dead. So we're going to do the time period right before the debt was forgiven. This puts Kaya at the #1 spot on the richest of all time. The next and last thing we are going to look at is Mirrodin, also known as New Phyrexia or Argentum. This plane was created by Karn, but when Phyrexians took over, Elesh Norn was in control, as she is the dominant praetor. We will be counting this towards Elesh Norn's net worth rather than the others, because she was in charge of it at the latest point. So it's likely to have the most infrastructure compared to when Memnarch or Karn controlled it. So Mirrodin is a planet made entirely out of metal, and we get a lot of great information about it. For example, we have literal measurements of the size of the planet, which makes it much easier to calculate the value of these metals. The outer sphere of the plane has a circumference of 1,400 kilometers with a diameter of around 450 kilometers. And there are 5 main regions of Mirrodin. Some are clearly made out of specific metal, and some are less clear. But we are going to assume that each of these regions is 1/5 the volume of Mirrodin, and that they are made of these metals. The Oxida chain is a range of mountains made of iron. The Tangle is a dense jungle made of copper. The Mephidros is a mucky swamp made mainly of lead. The Quicksilver Sea is a, sea made mainly of mercury. The Razorgrass fields are plains with sharp metallic grass, made mainly out of gold. 47 million cubic kilometers is the total volume of the planet, so that's 9.5 million cubic kilometers for each metal. So if we calculate the weight and price of these and add it all up, then we get $10 septillion. That is a massive number. And Elish Norn is by far the richest character in Magic history, by an unprecedented margin. Elish Norn is over 39 billion times more wealthy than Kaya, who is in second place. When I first started working on this video, I thought someone in the comments would dethrone my leaderboard, but with $10 septillion worth of medals, I don't find that very likely. This video took a lot of research and information gathering, and to be honest, I probably got a lot of things wrong. Magic's lore is very complicated, and roughly 50 hours of research can only do so much. There will be a pinned comment with the mistakes I made and notes. If you notice anything, please leave a comment so that I can add that info. I would also like to say that I hated making assumptions and guesses for the information, but I feel like that was necessary. I tried to eliminate as many of these as possible to get the information as accurate as possible. Also, for the information in this video, some of it was a lot more certain than others. For facts in the Magic world, I put this in the corner. For facts in the real world, which I applied to Magic, I put this in the corner. For educated guesses, I put this. And for uneducated guesses, I put this.
Made it to the end of this video, you probably enjoyed it, so please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and join my Discord server. Link in the description. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.